There we go. Fantastic. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Equalities and Future Generations Policy Development Committee. This is our first one for some time, so it's good to see everybody in one place, and hope everyone's keeping well. Yeah, just as we said, to be aware we are being filmed. Sort of usual housekeeping: can try and keep your mics on mute until you're ready to come in. Use the hands up function, or if that's not working at the end, I'll see if anyone else wants to come in at the end of an item. So apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. No apologies today.
Okay, thank you. And disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? No. Okay. Do we need to run through who's here, or for the records, or is that just done automatically?
Yeah, I just can take it from the participant list, Chair, unless you want to run through for your own knowledge. It's up to you.
No, I think everyone's aware of who's with us, so that's great. Okay, fantastic. And then we've got the minutes of the last meeting, if we can remember back as far as February. Anyone wish to approve those as a true records?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so fantastic. So the first item on our agenda is the update.
Sorry, Peter. Minutes.
Sorry, Peter.
Sorry, thank you. It's with reference to minute number 30, update on the SD policy. Could you just tell the committee who is actually leading on there? What is the process in terms of involvement of people actually drafting that policy statement?
I think Susie, is it, and that we did meet with previously, didn't we, Peter? And Richard Rowland's team are working on it, and they're going to bring something back to us hopefully in our August meeting. So I'll mention that when we come to work plan at the end of the agenda. But yeah, hopefully we can have a draft of that before it comes to the.
So it's officer led at the moment.
Yeah, but I think we did have a little bit of input earlier on, didn't we? You and I met to have a look at the sort of start, but we can sort of chase up on that and see what stage it's at before it comes back to the committee.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so co-production then, yes, this is an item that we've had on our work plan for a little while. It's sort of been developing, and we did ask for it to come back regularly. Sarah Lackenby had to give her apologies because she's on leave today, but Jo Portwood, you're going to sort of talk us through the progress made and sort of update on what's being done on that.
Yeah, I can do that. Has everybody had a chance to see the briefing note that Sarah circulated? I think Louise circulated it to you as an informal note, but I'll run through it. Basically, there was a strategic co-production framework that was developed in December. Sarah then had a session with heads of service to look at sort of planning various consultation events over the next 3 years. And I think it was quite useful in the sense that she made a distinction between sort of different types of consultation and the concept of the ladder of consultation, from sort of very simple information right through to co-production, because I think the committee have discussed in the past that co-production isn't always the most appropriate form of consultation, and really it depends on sort of like what the issue in hand is. So I mean, there's very little point maybe sort of adopting a co-productive approach if what we're consulting on is sort of like heavily prescribed in terms of legislation, in terms of the how and the why we're doing it, really. So she's identified some pilot areas, but unfortunately because of sort of COVID, this is sort of on hold at the moment. So we're just sort of waiting really for the sort of the development of the recovery plan, and I'm sure co-production will be part of that. And I think Sarah's undertaken sort of a review of resources within the directorate, and again sort of co-production and consultation will feature in that, really. So there is work that's underway, but it has sort of stalled somewhat really because of the COVID pandemic. So it's just a brief update for the committee. I don't know if anybody's got any specific questions they want to raise, or
I just wanted to ask a bit. So you mentioned about the reviewing the equality impact assessments and potentially bringing in co-production in as part, perhaps part of that as an integrated impact assessment. Could you expand on that a little bit? What the form might that
Okay,
take?
yeah. So my line manager, Richard and Susie, they are reviewing the equality impact assessment process with Rian at the moment to ensure it's a bit more integrated, because lots of other local authorities, Neath, for example, Neath and Port Talbot have just developed quite a comprehensive integrated impact assessment. So there could be an opportunity to look at consultation within that process to ensure that new policies consider, again, the most appropriate form of consultation, whether that's sort of a simple consultation or co-production. So I think that's sort of quite something that's quite easy that could be done to sort of like tweak sort of decisions as they go forward, really. So I mean, if the committee were interested in having an update on the integrated impact assessment at some point, I'm sure we could build that into the work programme. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'd be interested to see that in the future. I've got Peter and then Joe. So take Peter first. You're still muted, Peter.
Trying to unmute.
There we are. Yeah, sorted.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for this paper, Joe. And co-production has been something that I experienced many years ago when I worked in a previous capacity, and I never quite understood the value of it then, but I'm sure it's possibly more useful now. But I've just got a point in relation to number 3 in the paper. It references a training program being developed, and that this has been rolled out to CMT, etc. Could we have that training program? I mean, I'd be interested to see exactly what it is and who it engages with and how it's done, and so forth. I'm interested that it's gone to Cabinet, but it hasn't come to this committee.
Yeah, I can go back and ask Sarah for that programme. I believe it was CMT and Cabinet. I think it was more of an introductory programme, but I can't see any reason why the programme can't come to the committee as a resource. So I'll check with Sarah for that. Okay,
thank you. And just a very quick query. In paragraph 6, penultimate line, IIA. Perhaps I'm the only one who doesn't know what IIA is, but what is that?
Sorry, that's the integrated impact assessment. Sorry, you are right. You should have sort of spelled that out fully. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Joe, do you want to come in next? And I've got Leslie after that.
Yeah, cheers. Joe, what's just, I don't quite understand the difference between a simple consultation and a co-production consultation. My understanding is all consultations, regardless, have to be genuine. So I've never heard of a term that simply focuses on one element of a strategy as a co-production consultation. What's the difference between simple and the co-production?
Okay. My understanding of a simple consultation would be something like a questionnaire. By the development of a questionnaire, you're assuming that you already know what's important. So you're asking people a series of questions, whether they agree or disagree with them. I think co-production is different in the sense of you would decide with all the stakeholders what the important questions are before you even get to the stage of a questionnaire. So it's more about sort of sharing that power in terms of deciding what's important.
But the legal framework around all consultations say they have to be genuine. So if you enter into a simple consultation, but you already know the answer, how do you demonstrate that that's genuine unless you change the outcome during the consultation?
I think sorry, Joe.
Sorry.
So if I could come in now, I think maybe it's something like, for example, a consultation on planning applications. That's quite a strict process that takes place. You wouldn't be able to use co-production for something like that, would you? Because it's obviously, as Joe mentioned before, a legal process, and it happens at a later stage. Whereas with co-production, it's about developing things from the beginning together. So so they're not necessarily opposed to each other. They're just different. Does that make sense? Is that what you were asking? Or
it does, but I think if it's not a genuine consultation, I don't think we should be using the term consultation.
Well, that's
partnership working, yeah. but it can't be consultation in the true sense, because there has been a standout High Court judgment on what is, and what's demonstrated as a genuine consultation.
Mm.
I'm not looking to pick holes. All I'm just saying,
no, it's fine.
It has to be right. I deal with consultations every day of the week in work, so we never have anything that comes to us as a simple consultation. It's either a consultation or it's not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did look at the consultation strategy on last year sometime, didn't we? So that was being renewed, so we could have a look at that again. I don't know if I don't think the final strategy's finished yet, is it? So right, Yvonne, did you want to come in? I've got Leslie and Terry. Yeah. Yvonne, is this on this point? Is that quickly?
Yeah. I was just wondering, is the word simple, is that what Joe is querying? Should the word be removed?
More than likely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just the wording.
Okay.
We all agree that consultation should be done properly and is very important in all our processes. Okay, Leslie.
I think partly following on, it links with what Joe has just been saying. I also just have a simple problem with the phrase co-production. And I'm guessing that the vast majority of people who read that phrase would have no idea what that couple of words mean. And yet now I've got to grips, and it's taken me a long time to get my head around it. Now I've got there, I realise just how important it is. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you know that we're trying to set up in Swansea a truth commission. And the whole point of that is that at last we have realised that you need to get the people involved who are affected by a policy to be involved in putting that policy together. There's absolutely no point us all behaving like clever clogs and deciding what's best for them, when of course the people who know what's best for them are them. And I just think that maybe we ought to do something more, either use a different phrase or something better to describe what we're talking about. Co-production could just simply be two friends getting together and co-produce some jam or clothes or whatever. It seems to me Terry was good. It seems to me it's not quite the right phrase, or if we're going to stick with it, we've got to explain it more. When I read this briefing note, I thought there was nothing here whatsoever that told me what co-production was. And I think that's a big mistake, that we need always, when we're talking about anything, we need to explain what that is. That's the very first priority. That's what should have been at the top of this page, because every time we read this, it might be after we've dealt with a lot of other stuff. So, you know, we need to be clear about what we're talking about.
I think in defence of Sarah and Joe, the producer paper, this is sort of an update for us who've had a lot of previous updates on co-production, not a public paper. So so that's probably why it's not sort of spelled out there. And I think that, you know, the reason we use the term is that it is actually enshrined in some of the legislation, isn't it? So is the Social Services Act, for example, and that's why it's sort of where a lot of it comes from. But Joe, did you want to respond to any of that?
No, I take on your board. I can't see why we couldn't include a sentence every time we're talking about co-production, just to remind people sort of what it is. I don't think it necessarily needs to be particularly long or complex, really. And although sort of papers go to committees, then sometimes they go further afield. So I think they are sort of good points, and I think we can amend that. So going forward.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, we've got Terry. It says one other. I can't see who the other is. Terry. Oh, you're muted, Terry.
Just to say, I agree with Joe on the consultation. Is the consultation just for officers and staff, or are we going to go, you know, outside? Our councillors as well should be consulted on it. But are we going to go public in respect of finding out what they want, not necessarily what we say they should have?
What, in terms of this co-production strategy, or
any strategy really? Consultation, if it was a council tenant, it'd be section 105 the 85 Housing Act, but that's something else. I'm just wondering if is it all being kept indoors?
Oh, I think the idea is that what we're trying to develop is a strategy that will be good practice for everyone to use in anything we do with the public, really, isn't it, Joe?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So I think councillors would be well placed to have the training when it gets rolled out as well. I think would definitely be very helpful. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Peter Jones wants to come back in.
Yes, very quickly, Chair. I'm grateful, I think, to Les for giving me, at least, and I'm sure the other members of the committee, a possibly clearer understanding of what is meant by co-production than I've ever encountered. I mean, my previous life with the RSPB, I had a number of meetings with officers from the Welsh Government who were trying at the time, and this is about 10 years ago, to develop the concept of co-production for application in terms of Welsh Government work and work in relation to NGOs and so forth. And we went through several meetings, and at the end of them, I was as sceptical at the end as I had been at the beginning, because I had no clear understanding, and I don't think the presenter from the Welsh Government perhaps had a very good understanding of what it was she was trying to develop. So I'm grateful for that. Just on the point, going back then to my point about the training programme, I would hope that the documentation for a training programme would indeed start with a clear statement, a clear definition of what we think we mean by co-production and how it is different from other kinds of consultation or involvement with the wider community. So if it isn't already, could I ask Jo that you please try to ensure that the training programme documentation does include the kind of definition that I think we're beginning to understand now for co-production. Thank you.
Okay.
And the other point I wanted to raise is, as you mentioned, that we, with the recovery plan, I think it would be a really good opportunity. Obviously, our resources are incredibly stretched, but it would be a very good opportunity if we are going to start doing some things in a new way to build co-production into that. Might it be worth if we could have a chat with Adam Hill, perhaps in a future meeting, who's leading on the recovery plan, and see if he can update us on how we are building principles, even if we can't co-produce to the letter, but principles of co-production as part of the recovery plan. If would the committee support that? Yeah, I don't see any objections. So fantastic. Would anybody else like to raise anything on this item? So I think just to resolve that we keep up with this work and keep a watching brief on it, and yeah, it would be useful to have a look at, as you say, the training programme and perhaps the integrated assessments, and a look at the recovery plan perhaps in a future meeting. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Jo. Okay, so moving on to the human resources and organisational development update. Thank you to Adrian for coming back to see us again. There is a report as part of the agenda starting on page 4. Adrian, I don't know if you want to talk us through that first, or however you want to do it.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I think the action from the last meeting was for me to come back and give an update on the survey that an organisation called Equalities undertook for us, and they undertook quite a detailed 74-page document highlighting sort of issues around sort of the engagement with the workforce across a range of issues that impact on equalities issues. And there's a very brief summary I appreciate in the paper that I've submitted. I suppose some of the key points from the survey that was undertaken is, first of all, we only had a 9% return of the survey that was issued, despite issuing the survey to all staff in the same way that our regular employee surveys are done. But for some reason, there really wasn't the interest in completing the survey from across the organisation. So that, to some extent, sort of hampered the results of that survey. Equalities analysed the results of that survey across a whole range of issues, particularly around areas such as flexible working, performance management, recruitment and selection, reward and recognition, as an example. And there were some areas that we were marginally better than the public sector comparators, and some areas that we were marginally worse than. But in broad terms, we were alongside virtually all of our local authority and public sector organisations in terms of the level of support and service that we provide to our employees. There were a number of actions that came out of the document, particularly around recruitment and selection. flexible working, performance management, learning and development, and reward and recognition. And those were, I think it's fair to say, had already been recognised and were being acted on. There were some areas that we've picked up on and are included in terms of our sort of future way forward. And that's reflected in the next section where we talked about sort of the recruitment attraction activities that we're engaged in. Overall, the results from the Chwarae survey gave us a silver award, which is on a par with virtually every other authority and public sector body that's gone through this this survey. So, again, that sort of reflects that we are up there with all most other organisations in terms of that survey. When we challenged them as to why we didn't get gold, to be honest with you, I think basically they were saying, well, we really don't give gold awards to the people who go through the survey on the first time basis. In other words, they give us something to aim for in future surveys. So that's really basically it. So run through that part of the survey, through the Chwarae survey. The next part of the report is around the work that we're doing around recruitment and attraction. And again, to some extent, the survey has helped inform our approach on this. We've implemented an approach that we've basically called employee value proposition. So that we, if you like, sort of recognise that some staff and also potential employees of the candidates for employment in the council perhaps don't always recognise, and we don't often promote as well as we can what we offer as a council as an employer. So well, and also that's helped us identify ways that we can improve our employee benefits propositions, so that, for example, we have a Vectis card arrangement in place now for employees to gain discount on a whole range of sort of retail opportunities. We have the Cycle to Work scheme that's in place, and obviously that will support a whole workforce, but particularly those who are in sort of the lower wage brackets. But from a sort of recruitment and attraction perspective, we've recognised that we've needed to do a lot more work around making it easier for potential candidates to identify jobs that are available using language that's shall we say, more relevant to the job that's in place, making the job descriptions and the person specifications fit for purpose and more accessible, having an application process that's more accessible as well, because I don't know if any of you have tried to apply for a job in the council. It's quite a tortuous process to apply online, and I speak from personal experience of that. So we're also working to try and improve and remove the barriers that are perceived to be in place in applying for jobs, but also, of course, ensuring that we comply with certainly equal opportunities legislation, equalities legislation, but also best practice in that respect. We're also pre-COVID, and hopefully we'll be picking this up in the autumn, working with bodies such as disabilities groups, ethnic minorities groups from across the communities in Swansea, so that those groups have the opportunity to, or the best possible opportunity to apply for roles as they come up. And then the third part of the report is just to sort of, I feel like, bring to your attention the work that we've done as a result of COVID-19 for those employees in the BAME bracket who, as we are aware, are at sort of greater risk of COVID-19, and the work that we're doing to support them in speaking to them individually about any concerns that they might have, but introducing a risk assessment to address issues that might be appropriate for BAME workers that are perhaps less important, if you like, for our other workforce. So that's really sort of quick skim through the paper. I appreciate it's not a detailed paper, but hopefully that sort of covers off the main aspects, and happy to take questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Adrian, and thank you. I know, with all the staff across the council are incredibly involved in a lot of other stuff going on right now. So I really do appreciate all the officers for providing reports and working with us on these things at the moment. So right at the moment I can see I've got Terry, Yvonne and Joe waiting to come in. I've got a couple of questions myself, so we'll start with Terry.
Yeah, going back to the Chwarae survey, 74 pages. Did we have to pay Chwarae to carry out the survey?
Yes, we did. It was basically the decision was made at CMT level that we would engage Chwarae, and as a result of that, they identified that they would provide this survey to produce this survey. Perhaps I should have said that part of the survey package, shall we say, includes providing a day's consultancy to support on a sort of topic of our choice, and it's been decided that we will engage with them to review our recruitment and selection approach, to basically support the findings of their report and the views of the council in moving that particular piece of work forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Yvonne.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, Adrian. The first one really is there any chance of seeing the report, a copy of the survey? That's one thing. Also, this is in a way just being a little bit picky. You said about working with ethnic minority organizations.
Yeah.
But I think we need to work with organizations that work with ethnic minorities, because the two aren't exactly the same. Because you have some organizations that are not led and are not predominantly BMEs, but have clients or users or staff that are.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if you just bear that in mind.
Yeah, sure.
That was just it.
And I think certainly we can share the survey with you. I don't see that there's any reason why we can't do that. On the second point, if you have organisations that you feel it would be beneficial for us to engage with, then please let us know.
Okay. Good. Thanks very much.
Yeah, on that, I think nerds like me enjoy reading those kind of reports and things like that. So I would definitely like to see the full report if I can. That would be really useful. And obviously Yvonne particularly has got a wealth of experience working with these organisations. So it would be great if you took her up on that offer to help you identify the best people to speak to potentially. Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. Adrian, I raised this at a scrutiny committee meeting around the working from home policy. I'm just wondering if we've have an improved policy now, or if it is being worked on actively, because we've got a vast majority of staff now working from home, and it's just making sure that their health, safety and well-being is being looked after.
Yes, we are reviewing all of our HR policies, of which there are over 70, some of which are not policies, in my opinion, but we're trying to sort of reduce those to a much more manageable number. And one of the sort of the issues that was picked up from the survey was staff awareness of our policies, and that's something that we are conscious that we need to do. To ensure that staff, as we said, are aware of and are promoted across the organisation. In terms of the flexible working policy, that was one of the policies that we were looking at, and that obviously has taken on greater significance as a result of COVID. And of course, you're right, that does include, health, safety and well-being of our employees who are working from home continually, myself included. To make sure that we take all of that on board, that we have the right equipment for staff, that they are that they're maintaining contact with their colleagues and their teams, that they are, you know, as productive as they possibly can be in the circumstances, and obviously ultimately that that we look after their health and well-being. So that's being looked at the moment. Yes, definitely.
Okay, thanks very much, Adrian.
Was there anyone else before I ask my questions? Okay. So, oh, sorry, Peter Jones.
Come on, unmute.
No, you're okay. No, you.
Ah, there we are. Why does it do?
Oh, I think we've lost you again, Peter. You're on mute now. You're okay now. Right.
I won't move. Yes, I thought Yvonne made an important point in terms of the distinction that she made between organisations speaking for BAME communities and actual representatives or members of those communities. And I'm just wondering, with a point to make to Adrian, perhaps. I don't know whether, Adrian, you've been in touch with the BAME hub based in the Grand Theatre here in Swansea, but this is a hub that's been established that brings together, I think it's now 20 separate ethnic minority organisations. I know this because my wife from the Latin American community is one of them. And I think they would be a good set of people to talk to, because they're not, in a sense, outsiders speaking for the communities. They are members of the communities. They are people who have come together from the different 20-odd communities to try and advance their awareness, representation, involvement with society in Swansea. So I would suggest, Adrian, very humbly, that you get in touch with these people, and I think they could be proved very useful to you in terms of an understanding of BAME problems. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, if you could send me their contact details, that would be.
I will.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Will do. Thanks, Adrian. Cheers.
Okay, thank you. So I had sort of three things I wanted to raise. First of all is I'm still quite concerned, well, not concerned, but just frustrated about our own data. I mean, like you said yourself, the take up of the survey was really low, and that makes things really difficult, doesn't it? And it really skews the results, and it is very difficult to provide any baseline figures for improving our diversity of staff and things like that if we don't know who we've got to start from. And I know obviously that's maybe been shown during the COVID-19 crisis, as it would have been, we've had to bring in this toolkit to identify BAME staff and things that people might have from working from home and issues like with childcare and things like that. So if we can continue to try and improve our data and take up of these surveys, there's no easy answer because you can't force people to do it, but we could work harder at getting them to persuading them to, maybe. I don't know how, but
on that point, Louise.
Hold on a second. Sorry.
Could have been a simple survey.
A simpler survey. I don't know. I haven't seen the question, so I don't know. Sorry, Adrian.
Yeah, well, it's always a question with survey, and some of the sort of the comments back. While broadly positive, there were some comments about the value of the survey and what benefit would the council get out of that, which we sort of as Equalities also acknowledged and we acknowledged in trying to sort of shape, if you like, any need and just the necessity for a future survey. The point about BMA about our employee data, yes, that's really valid. And that's, for me, from a personal perspective, was quite sort of evident when we tried to contact our BAME workforce, specifically around COVID-19, and we worked closely with the BAME representative from Unison in sort of agreeing our approach to that. But we were, of course, hampered by the fact that we could only directly contact those employees who identified themselves as BAME workers, and we all knew that there were many workers who, for whatever reason, hadn't disclosed their ethnicity, and that to some extent we've agreed with the Unison representative is something that we need to work on with the Equalities group, I guess, also to if you like, promote, encourage, give people the confidence to disclose their ethnicity on that form.
Great. And I know as part of the Equality Scrutiny Inquiry, we looked at some of the materials that Stonewall had produced, obviously, which are mainly about LGBT, but it's applicable across the sort of equality group. So I think that their materials were quite good on trying to persuade people to give up their data if that's possible to steal from them. So.
Yeah.
The second question I had was, point was making, I was really great to hear what you're saying about reviewing the language in our job applications and things like that, and making it much more simple, because I think, as again, a part of the inquiry, a lot of the things came up about finding the applications process quite difficult to manage, really trying to explain to people that we really value lived experience of people with disability. I know when we spoke to the veterans group, for example, they said it would be really great to know that we valued veterans as an organisation, and that they would like to work for us, and I've said BAME groups, as we said, so it's just a point I wanted to raise there. And then the third thing is, in response to what you were saying to Joe about reviewing policies, I just wondered if there was any update. I know that you've been looking at the domestic abuse for staff policy, and bringing in, sort of making that clearer about what's available for staff there, because obviously we've heard the horrible statistics about domestic abuse rising during the lockdown, and now people are kind of coming out of lockdown. Staff might want to take advantage of some of the provisions of that policy. So
so on that particular policy, I'll need to double check on this, and I'll come back to you with a definitive answer, but that has been revised and has been in the process of revision. I believe it's gone through to CMT, and then the next stage will be going to consult with trade unions, and then it goes to JCC for final approval. And obviously, again, due to COVID, I'm not trying to make an excuse on this. When the next JCC will be to put that forward, if you like, for approval and implementation.
Okay, but it is on the agenda.
Oh, definitely, yes, yeah.
Okay, so I've got quite a few people waiting to come in. I've got Yvonne, Terry, Mary, and Leslie. So Yvonne, first of all, and Linda, is that your hand up? Yeah, and Linda as well. Okay, so Yvonne, first of all.
Thanks, Chair. I thought I'd just come back on a point Adrian mentioned about consulting Unison about how to consult the your BME workers, or our BME workers, and the BME community at large. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to apply some of the co-production, as opposed to asking Unison or anyone else for that matter. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I feel, and I know, it's often quite good to ask the person themselves. And it would solve one of the problems. Lots of people across the communities, including BME, don't like to say they're disabled. You go down the road. When I worked at DVLA, hardly anyone admitted that they had a disability. So if we had the people in the room, and you explained why you were asking these questions, then more people would be inclined to say why they're disabled. Because you have to remember, some of us, even though we might be born here, we grew up in a community where government organizations and the police are not trusted. They're not your friends. So you're not going to give them any information that's going to potentially backfire on you. Okay, so I know it's difficult to keep some of these things in mind, because part of me feel you live here, just follow the rules, but that's not how it works. And as a equality group, we're saying give everyone the opportunity, but so then you have to take into account those issues, because as I said, I worked for years in DVLA from the 70s, and one of my jobs was this. But hardly anyone, they've just come out of hospital with a heart attack and they're back in work, they're recovering from. But they'll tell you, no, I don't have a disability, I'm fine. Because we're all scared to a certain extent. What is it going to do for us? Okay, so that's really.
I understand and agree with what you said there.
And sorry, I should have said, but sorry, Chair. As the Chair said, I'm happy to help in any way, get a group together, whatever.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I've got Terry. You want to come back in?
Yeah, just to say that we had a team of workers out of housing options for many years, working with BME and of course the asylum seekers and refugees. Is that group of those workers, are they still together? Because the work is ongoing ever since going back to the, I've said it many times, the Vietnamese boat people, all the way through to the Europeans, Eastern Bloc and everything else. So is that team still in working in any shape or form?
From a HR perspective, I'm not aware of any of those groups. I don't know, Joe, if you are aware from an Equalities group perspective.
I can see as well that the cabinet member Alison Pugh's come on the call as well. Alison, I don't know if you obviously know what work's going on with asylum seekers and refugees.
I'm not sure of what group Terry means, to be honest. Do you know what I mean? There are lots of groups out there, and Helen Clancy and Ria's linking with many groups. But it may have altered slightly from what Terry is talking. It may have developed into, a sort of different group, because there are a range of groups there. If you want specific answers, I can find out for you and feedback to you.
Yeah, I'm not talking about groups in the community. I'm talking about employees of the council.
Oh, right.
It was like a small department working on
sorry, I misunderstood.
Started the work from it, because we mustn't forget the good work that's already been done, not just by the council, but local communities and local schools as well.
I don't know of that group. I don't know of that group in the council, and do you? Adrian, are you aware of that? I think that's stopped, doesn't it?
I certainly in the time that I've been here, I'm not aware of any of those groups.
No.
So just as I say, whether Joe would be aware of the Equalities group.
No, I'm not aware of any specific officer groups, but there are a number of community-based groups.
Yeah.
Yvonne, did you want to respond to that?
I was going to say, I think there's now only Helen and Riaz, the departmental section that Terry's talking about.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain closed a good 3, 4, 5 years ago. So it hasn't been in operation for a good while.
And they've done a fantastic job, as you know, Yvonne. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we've got Mary Sherwood. Is that coming next?
Thank you. Morning. I agree with what Yvonne said about getting people together and being very clear about why we want their data. But at the same time, I think, are we really clear? And I don't know, like Louise, I haven't seen the survey. I don't know how it was introduced to people and what people think the point of it is. The point for us as a major public sector organisation is to have a diverse workforce, so that between us we understand the diverse needs of our population and we can respond to them better and provide better services. And I think that can get lost when people just feel that we're being nosy about their business. But also, George Floyd didn't get murdered because he filled in a form disclosing his ethnicity, right? And actually, the really dangerous discrimination that people experience on the streets of Swansea day to day does not require them to tick a box disclosing anything about themselves. So while I have every respect for the fact that we have to try and capture data that isn't always visible, and we need to understand the experiences of people whose protected characteristics aren't always very visible. Actually, the worst discrimination tends to be experienced on an everyday basis by people whose protected characteristics are very, very visible. And I find it very difficult to believe that we can't do better on working out who in our own workforce is visibly BAME, and to set that as a baseline that we use to try and improve the diversity, at least in that respect. I know that disabilities are hidden, and even aspects of ethnic heritage might be hidden, but you don't know anything about my ethnic heritage, and if I were to disclose certain aspects of that to you, you might think that that's a fascinating surprise, but it won't have caused me any harm in my life because I look like I'm white. So, do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying? I've been struggling with this problem. I got elected 3 years ago, and ever since then there's been this problem. Oh, we don't have baselines. Oh, people don't disclose. Oh, they haven't filled in the survey. And I just feel like this is really, really holding us back from grasping the nettle of improving the diversity of our workforce. And I think we must be able to do better than this.
Louise, you're on mute.
Sorry, Adrian, did you want to respond to that? I mean, I feel uncomfortable with the idea of jumping to conclusions about people's ethnicities and things vary, but
yeah, I mean, it's
that's what people do, and that's why we have racism.
Oh, obviously, yeah, but that's not necessarily what we should be doing. So, Adrian, sorry.
At the same time, you know, a bunch of overwhelmingly white people saying, oh dear, we can't really address the lack of ethnic diversity in our workforce because we've got no idea who's black in our workforce. How could we know? How could we know? This drives me nuts. Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you with what you're saying there, and you know, if you look at I haven't got the stats in front of me, but you know, the vast majority of our workforce will tick the prefer not to say box for many aspects of the areas that are covered up by protected characteristics. And then, you know, obviously this COVID-19 has highlighted the issue with BAME workers, and that's really what, you know, we need to do for that group, and of course other groups, to give them the confidence and the assurance that, you know, we are collecting it for legitimate reasons, if you like, to help improve their working relationship, if you like, with the council, and also encourage, you know, potential candidates from the wider Swansea communities. It's going to be a long process. We have got an opportunity, I think, with the implementation. This is a technical point. Implementation of Oracle in next year, to go out and re-ask the question for staff to identify their ethnicity, for example, or if they have a disability, or any of the protected characteristics. But again, that, you know, we could ask that question, but as we sort of found out through, you know, a number of surveys, you know, we have to give staff the confidence to disclose that in the first instance, as well as just simply asking that question.
Okay. Thank you. I've got Leslie, Linda, and then Alison. Did you want to come back in as Equalities Cabinet member? And then so Leslie next.
Thanks. Going back again to the survey, I've been very interested as I've been listening to people talking. My thoughts have changed as we've gone along. Part of me, when I saw the survey 9%, I thought, oh Christ, that's nowhere near enough. But I've realised as we've been talking, it's not so much the quantity, it's whether we know that enough people of a diverse nature, ages, races, religions, colour, etc., 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 have responded to that survey. And I suspect not. Just the very fact that the response is 37 men, 61 women. I mean, that gets right from the outset, just shows you we're not probably getting the correct representation of the people we're trying to get these opinions from. And it strikes me that maybe that the survey is a useful starting point, but it's not the end of the story, and we need to do more to find out the information that survey was supposedly trying to capture, because I suspect we haven't really got anywhere near the full answer from it.
That's right, and the survey is really sort of reflecting, if you like, the views of the male and female workforce, and not the workforce of another protected characteristics. So I think we need to be careful that in terms of looking at the surveys, this particular survey, you're right, because we haven't had that great a response rate. but the survey really wasn't there to identify issues, for example, for those in the BAME population or the disabled population or the sexual orientation population of our workforce. That makes sense.
Yeah. Linda. Linda, are you still with us? Wanted to come in?
Yeah, I'm
Right.
all right.
Got you.
Right, I'm really want to talk about the survey. Cyril said right earlier on in the conversation, what was the survey like? Was it too complicated? Now, I have been involved with 2 surveys recently. For the first time in 16 years, my husband has bought a car. I'm the only driver now, and he decided that that I shouldn't be driving around in an old car. I had a survey sent to me. It was a booklet. It was loads of questions like engine capacity and what the last 3 cars were. Were I taking children in this car? What mileage was I going to do? There was so much stuff. I disregarded it. I had it sent to me again saying you haven't answered this survey, and I said, well, I haven't got time to swap for this exam. So I think, first of all, there needs to be, if you're trying to do a survey, make a few questions and make it simple. The other survey that I have been involved with is with Mums Community Council. The Mums Community Council did a fantastic job with volunteers helping with the COVID crisis. And now they wanted to find out, what people thought. Was it a good idea? So I had my list of people to phone, and it was not an easy thing to do. It was much better phoning people and taking them through the questions, and then halfway through the questions, you could see they'd got fed up with answering the questions. So I think you have to be very careful, when you're doing a survey of getting the length of questions right. Give them a few questions, keep them interested. And also, I think that you do better when you're actually speaking to people. You can't expect people to just have a survey thrown through the door or online and for them to be bothered to sit down when they've got so many other things in their life and sit down and answer them. That's the point I just wanted to make.
Okay. Thank you, Linda. I think that's well made. Adrian, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, just again, I can't disagree with what's just been said. But this survey was a Chwarae Teg survey. It wasn't a council survey. And while we had the opportunity to shape some of the questions, if you like, to make it more appropriate to Swansea, this is a Chwarae Teg survey, and they were the ones who were interpreting the results of it. So, but I do take your point. Yes, definitely.
But yeah, I think if we could maybe build on that then for our next staff survey, we can sort of take that. Okay, were there any sort of committee members who wanted to come back in before I bring Alison in as our cabinet member with responsibility for equalities? Mary and Leslie, you've still got your hands up. Did you want to come back in, or is that just existing from before?
Actually, can I come back in? A couple of things. And Adrian, I'm not getting at you at all about this, but I am slightly concerned that we weren't the people doing the survey. And I also, I'm not sure I see really the worth of it. I mean, I was being very careful when I spoke earlier to try and say, okay, the survey's a starting point. I'm not really even convinced that we've got much out of that at all. I almost think it's a slight red herring from our point of view for what we need to be doing as a local authority. But that's just my feeling. So thank you.
Okay, go to Alison then. Thank you.
Hi, Adrian, and I apologise. I was at another meeting, so I missed a presentation or feedback or anything that you said. So I am talking a little bit blinder. So I do apologise. It was in regards to obviously Riaz community cohesion wise reports to me, and he has raised concerns really over the fact that we don't really know our workforce, and COVID really sort of highlighted that, as in from a call centre point of view, we didn't know which languages our staff spoke, or could write, and our staff could have been of such help to the call centre in translation, getting messages out there, but we don't hold the data to be able to know who, do you know what I mean? Because even if you speak to Riaz speaks multiple languages, you know, and I'm sure that in a workforce our size, we have many languages covered here, but we can't access anything like that. And so I know it's difficult pulling information and things like that from people, but somehow we have to get this in the system, whether it's at housing, whether it's at, you know, on entry into the workforce, whatever. We somehow have to be able to capture this information going forward. And I know surveys are hard. Digital is hard for lots of people to have that that access. But the only other thing I would say, Louise and I were at a meeting the other night, a racism, stand up to racism meeting, and somebody that was speaking on there made a comment that Swansea Council doesn't have anybody from the BAME community above a grade 9 working for them. And now the difficulty we got is we couldn't dispute that because we don't know if that's right or wrong. You know, so we're on a back foot even going to meetings. Do you know what I mean? So it is difficult. So I'm not knocking anybody or the work or anything, but now I think we've done so much work digitally, and there's a new system coming in place and things like that, IT. Maybe now's the time we've got to sort of really get those questions asked.
Yeah, I agree.
Fantastic. Okay, I'll draw this item to a close. Is there anybody else that wanted to make any quick final comments? No. Well, thank you very much, Adrian, for that update. I think it was really useful, and yeah, it's obviously work that we'll continue to look at going forwards, and perhaps bring you back for further updates as and when required. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone.
Fantastic. Bye. Okay, so just got well, sort of final sort of discussion item before we look at the work plan, which is about the Black Lives Matter motion. So obviously when the motion was passed at full council, it was agreed that we would bring it to this committee to look at the work. And I think it's especially in the spirit of what we were saying earlier in the meeting, we definitely want to do this in using the principles of co-production and as wide engagement as we possibly can. So the first thing obviously was we need to agree to formally add this item to our work plan, because obviously it wasn't on the work plan earlier. So sort of before we go any further, are we all as a committee happy to do that, to add the sort of actions coming out of the motion to the work plan? Perhaps it'd be easier if people spoke out if they were against rather than for. Okay, so no objections to that. That's fantastic. But what I was going to propose is, because obviously there's quite a lot of work to do, this meeting only meets monthly, we have got other items on the agenda, was that we could do some of the work as we've done with some other topics in a sort of subgroup or a working group, and then report back to the wider committee on a monthly basis, then to make sure that everyone's keeping up to date. Is everyone again happy with that approach as we have done? That's what we've set that as a precedent, really, haven't we? Yeah, Cyril, did you put your hand up? Did you want to come in on that?
Not so much on that. I'm totally behind whatever the committee goes for. But I'm wondering, did everybody receive an email from Annalyd Thomas yesterday? I thought it was very, very threatening that if we don't seem to be doing the right thing, he is going out to all the constituents and telling them that we're going to be voting against Black Lives Matter. So, but I thought that was very disturbing.
Well, I will hold that point there, because we've had some public questions which I'm going to deal with at the end of the item, if that's okay, and perhaps you could raise that point there under public questions, if that's okay. Okay, so fantastic. The other thing just wanted to quickly establish is that would the committee be willing to co-opt Councillor Yvonne Jardine onto the committee for that item, as she's got a lot of personal and work experience around this item, and I think would be a real asset to us moving forward on this. Is everyone in favour of that, co-opt Councillor Jardine? Fantastic. Welcome, Yvonne, to the PDC for the item. Okay, so I really want to sort of set out, because I know there's been a lot of Chinese whispers and things like that around this, and people suggesting that we've actually made decisions, which we haven't at all. You know, there's absolutely zero decisions been made. All that we've committed to do is to look at this work, and that's what this committee is going to do. So we don't know anything in terms of particular streets or statues or anything like that. No decisions at all have been made whatsoever. So just really wanted to make that point from the outset. And you know, it might end up that no changes are made whatsoever. It's more about adding to what we've got rather than taking anything away. But we're not sort of predisposed to any particular decisions. That's what, as I said, we want to work co-productively and so on. So yeah, I think so what I was going to suggest again is that we work on this fairly quickly, as it's quite timely, and I want to make sure that we are doing that, as I said, in wider engagement, and then look to produce a kind of new policy and action plan around this to go to Cabinet. I've spoke to the leader, and he would like us to bring something forward by around October time, if that works for everybody. So what I would like us to do then is to call a sort of smaller meeting in the next couple of weeks. I'm taking some leave from next week for 2 weeks, so looking to call something in the week beginning of August the 10th to sort of start fleshing out our plan and speaking to the relevant officers to help take us forward. Is that okay for everybody? Oh, sorry, I can see some hands up, so I'll take committee comments first of all. So I can see Joe. Cyril, have you still got your hands up? Did you want to come back in, or no? Okay, Joe.
Yeah, just Louise, that I'm a little bit concerned, fully supportive of the ideal behind Black Lives Matters, but I suppose my real great angst, and I hope this is what we're doing, is looking at everything strategically, because I don't believe that statues being brought down is really very helpful. And at the same time, I'm so much more in favour, and I think we should be, in education and engagement.
100%.
You know, racism is learned behaviour, and I know Mary talked about ethnicity and background. Well, everybody assumes that I'm English. and there's only one or two people know that I'm not actually English, and I was brought up in an immigrant family in South London. So I do get, and during the 1970s, which wasn't very easy for several reasons. No, so I do get the angst. I do get the need sometimes to vent that frustration, but as a long-term strategy, I really am frightened and worried about where that leads us to.
Well, I think
sorry, Louise, and that I suppose is my fear. I'm 57 years of age. I've been through and seen several riots. Been involved in a couple actually in London. So do you know? I just really fear for society if we're gonna go down this road. I really firmly believe it's education, it's engagement, it's communication, and I have experienced racism, and I'll tell you, the only people that can tell you how it feels are those that have been affected by it. And with that, Louise, I've only come in early because I've got to go. I'm 4 or 5 minutes late for another one.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, just to come back on that, 100% agree in terms of this is about education. It's about telling Swansea's story. It's about adding to our history and filling in the gaps that a lot of people don't know about already in terms of our culture and our heritage. And as you say, definitely about education. Like I said, we're not making any suggestions about tearing down statues or anything. I don't think we've even got particularly any statues in Swansea to tear down. But yeah, it's about, we haven't made any decisions, and that's why we need to work together. And I completely agree with engagement with the wider community and our community groups to move this forward.
That's excellent.
Thank you. Yvonne was waiting to come in, and then I've got Linda. Oh, you're muted, Yvonne.
Sorry. Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Sorry. I agree with largely with what Joe is saying or has just said, but I feel, as I said at the original meeting, education could potentially go a long way. I don't feel realistically we're ever going to eradicate racism, but my main concern is that this committee is about racism. It's about what we can do. It's about how we can maybe ease the way forward. For me, pulling down a statue and I walk down the road and I get hassled, what's been achieved? So in a way, I'm pleased to hear you saying it won't be about pulling down statues or changing road signs. It will be about, for the generation coming, for my grandchildren, for my great-grandchildren, how are they being treated? Is it any better than I have been? So that's it really. But I do agree with a lot of what Joe has just said.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yeah, definitely appreciate it. Linda.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've given it a lot of thought. It really has bothered me, and I've made loads of notes. And what I was thinking was that it can be a moment of genuine enlightenment. We need to have a public debate on this. And one of the things I think we want to think of is, where do we want to be in 10 years' time? You know, I've been fortunate. I went to a sort of a church school where they changed missionaries, and I had a little Indian girl in my class who I was a friend. And this was quite something all those years ago, so many years ago, because I'm quite old. My husband also went to that school, and I never came across racism really and prejudice until I was 17, when my mother sent me to help in the mission to Siemens, and the vicar said, you know, has anybody got any children who would go and help in the mission to Siemens? And I was mocked because people said that I went to the docks to dance with the sailors. I mean, I did, but it made me so cross because I couldn't understand why there should be this. So I think that definitely education. As a child, I think children don't see colour. My husband, when he was in a class with Ethiopian people, he didn't see colour. I think it's people's attitudes, and I think that we need to start there in the schools, you know, making it educating. And anyway, I'll have more to say about this when we come to it, but that's a starter. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, we're sort of limited to a degree in the scope of what we're sort of instructed to do by the motion, and so that's so primarily what we're going to be looking at is a review of sort of what we've got at the moment in Swansea, and then looking at what we need to add to that in terms of future developments, more blue plaques, more diverse representation across the city. I'm sure I know colleagues in education are already doing a lot of a really amazing work around that. So perhaps we could look in the future to pull on that as well. But yeah, we're a bit more limited in terms of what was in the motion in the first instance. Peter. Oh, sorry, I had Terry. Terry was waiting to come in next, and then Peter. Sorry, Terry.
To think that I might be agreeing with my good friend Linda Tyler Lloyd regarding education in the schools. What we found up in the Blind and Mice and Port Mead area was it was the children in that primary school that actually fetched everything together. They didn't see colour or race or any of that, and they'd come out of school together holding hands. And that's when the parents would meet the other family, their parents, and they'd exchange going for tea and things. And they are the people who actually fetches it in, not the likes of us. Them in the primary school at that age. And that's how we worked up here, and it's worked very well.
Mhm.
I won't go into what Queenie would say regarding her turn to make F&T, but she is typical of someone who came 20 odd years ago, so I agree with that. I don't think the Cabinet Member for Education will have a lot to say about it, but we'll just sit back and wait and see what she says. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important we keep the focus on what we said about telling Swansea's story, and about because obviously pupils in school, as I said, schools are doing a lot of work on this. They're only there for limited hours a day, so it's what happens when they go back to their families or they're walking around the city. So I think, so for us it's very much about, like I've said before, about telling Swansea's story and what do we stand for as a city of sanctuary in terms of the messages we're sending to our residents and visitors to the city. Okay, so got Peter and then Leslie.
Well, thank you, Chair. 3 points, if I may. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, my wife is from Latin America, from Colombia, as it happens. She experienced discriminatory, offensive behaviour when we lived in Reading back in the 1980s, I think it was. And that was extremely unpleasant, and I still remember it today. We've never experienced any incident of that kind since, but these incidents live with you. They really do, and they're very upsetting, and as I say, long-lasting. So there's that point to make. A general point I would then make is that human slavery, because this is, after all, one of the key issues behind the Black Lives Matter motion, as far as Swansea is concerned at least, enslavement of humans has existed for as long as recorded history has been able to lament the fact. One can look at Mesopotamia back at the 3000, 4000 BC, and their enslavement is part of the economic and social system. Anglo-Saxon England practiced enslavement. We know the Roman Empire and the Greek civilizations, as we call them, both practiced enslavement. So simply, this seems to be this horrific way of treating humans, and we had the most recent experience, of course, with Nazi Germany, enslavement in all but name. Again, exploitation. What we're talking here is about exploitation of humans by other humans, and this seems to be a trait that runs right through our history as a species. And therefore, Yvonne is right on that point, that it's not going to be easy to eliminate racism and racist thinking from the way we think. So when we come to address the issue of white-black racist relations, let's remember that in addressing that, what we need to address is a much wider issue of human exploitation of others. And I think there are economic reasons behind that, which perhaps we can explore in another place. And then a final specific point, if I may. I live in Delabesh Road, and I used to think, Delabesh, Norman French. Gosh, this land must have been owned once by a family who came over with William I back in 1066 or thereafter. How interesting. And I thought no more about it. When the Black Lives Matter issue came up, I looked into the history of the Delabesh family, and what I discovered was that they made their money in the 18th century through owning a plantation out in the West Indies, enslavement of presumably slaves brought across from West Africa, and so on and so forth. Now, what was the name of the road celebrating? Was it celebrating this enslavement history, or was it celebrating something else? And the something else, I think, is that it was celebrating a Swansea-based scientist in the late 18th, early 19th centuries, who no doubt did very good work in that field. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. But the fact that he was able to do it was because of the wealth of his family that had been delivered through their enslavement of people in the West Indies. So instead of being, as I think I always used to be, rather proud of living in Delabesh Road, so I didn't mind the Norman French background, that was rather interesting. I now find I'm living in a road that is celebrating enslavement of one group of people by another. And I certainly would want to see the name of my road changed, therefore, because of that history. Now, no doubt there are all sorts of associations across Swansea. The Vivian family, for example, and so forth. I don't know what their histories are, but and if one looks at the copper industry, the links with Chile, the way that workers were exploited in Chile to produce ore and so forth. All of that, there are all sorts of potential tentacles out there into practices in the 17th, 18th, into the 19th, indeed into the 20th century, when one takes on board coal mining and the exploitation, for want of a better word, of Welsh coal miners. One could go on forever, in a sense, looking at these things. So I think it's very difficult. I fully support the BLM approach, and I fully support the council motion. And I'm pleased to see, when one looks at what we've been asked to do by council, take action where possible to remove offending names. Well, now I've discovered an offending name, and I quite frankly would like to see it removed in due course. But then the second point is commission a deeper review of place names and public realm items that may have links to slavery and exploitation. And that we need to do. We need to understand better our history. But in so doing, we then need to decide, well, what do we do when we've discovered what that history is? How far can we extend, the name changing or the street name changing, or whatever it is that we might think is appropriate? Because probably it comes back to the basic point others have been making about education. We need, as a culture and a society, to understand our past, our history. But having understood that, we may conclude, well, okay, that was how it was in the 18th century. That's how it was in the 19th century. Let's recognise that fact. But we don't have to go around changing all the names because suddenly we've discovered they are offensive, when we've lived with them for decades and never thought they were offensive because we never knew what the history was. So it's difficult. I fully support what we're going to do, and I'd like to be involved with that. But let's be careful that we don't go too far in terms of the kind of programme we then come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, again, completely agree with that. It's definitely about filling in the gaps and understanding, and a wider sort of education about the city as a whole. And as you say, we might where would you stop in some cases? But it's about finding out and making a start, isn't it? And perhaps using this as an opportunity to look at things in a fresh light, and that might not involve making any changes at all. It might just be about a wider education. So I've got Leslie and then Mary.
Thank you. The first point I want to make, in a way, hinges on what Peter's just said, but in fact, I want to say, I think we're slightly falling into the trap of those awful people who've been given airtime over the last few days. They're the ones who are trying to make out that we are just going to go round willy-nilly changing names. Oh, we've already done that to Picton Arcade, haven't we? No, we haven't. And I'm a total cynic. I half think the person who owns Picton Arcade took down those signs because he wanted to make it look as though it was our decision. I am angry. I am angry beyond anger, because we have allowed people like the two emails, the leavers from Swansea and that great nephew, grandson or whatever of Picton, we are allowing them to dictate what's happening. That is outrageous. They have made out to everybody in Swansea who's stupid enough to watch their flipping video that we've made a decision already. We haven't made any decisions. So do you know what the first thing is? Is to make that clear and counter those vile, racist bigots. That's the first thing. And sorry, I've got to the point where I had to say that because, as you can see, I am getting slightly worked up about this. Because the whole idea, I have never in my, how long have I been on the council? Been on the council now 8 years. I have never received two emails as revolting as the two I've just received in the last couple of weeks. And a guy wrote to the paper and he talked about the hysteria following the Black Lives Matter. If he'd been in front of me, I think I would have punched him, because I was that angry about the way these people are suddenly reacting to what we're trying to do. Oh, and of course they use that wonderful thing. Oh, we're trying to rewrite history. How can we rewrite history? History has happened. You cannot rewrite it. It's done and dusted. So, sorry, I had to get all that out because I think we've all got to start being a bit more angry about this. Otherwise, we're just going to fall into the trap of the garbage that these people come out with. Absolute garbage. Right, the serious points I was going to make go back to what Louise said earlier about doing something quickly. Right, I think we've got to split the work up into two strategies. One, yes, a quick response to say, we haven't made any decisions. We are going to look very closely at everything as far as we possibly can. And no, it will not be just a knee jerk. We'll change the name of that street, pull down that statue, though, as you pointed out, what statues? Anyway, the point is we are going to do this work carefully, but we need to come out with a very quick response so far as to get that message across. But I think the actual work, I don't want to rush this.
No.
I want to take months over it, maybe even years, I don't know. And yes, there will be a lot of work. And the other usual thing that the protagonists have chucked at us, oh, it's going to cost money. Why are we spending money doing this? Well, I'm quite happy to do work. I'm quite happy to do it for nothing because I think this is that important. Yes, of course, we'll have to use officers up to a point, but I think we can limit how much we depend on them, and we can be putting quite a bit of effort into getting this right. Sorry, I know I've taken a lot, but
no, thank you.
A lot needed to be said.
No, thank you, Leslie, and I appreciate your passion on this issue. And just to clarify, when I said a quick response, I didn't mean definitely no knee-jerk reactions, but I meant I just didn't want us to look like we were dragging our feet and avoiding the issue. I wanted us to get to work quickly.
Yeah, I know what you meant. And please, I would very much like to be on the working party.
Absolutely. Okay, I've got Mary, I think, and I can't see any other hands up at the moment. Let me know if I've missed anyone.
Thank you. Yeah, I salute you with your anger. Absolutely. And I agree with a lot of what Peter said. And what I'm thinking of is what progressive times we are living in and how our attitudes are changing all the time in a way that improves us as a society and helps tackle inequalities. You know, I remember when I was a teenager going out to a nightclub and getting the night bus home, my friends and I were constantly under siege from blokes who thought that they had a claim on our flesh and would hassle us and grab us, you know, and now, because of the Me Too movement and all that public discussion about harassment, you know, a friend of mine in Scotland was able to report a guy who just kept placing his hands on her every time he was moving past her on the way to the bar, and she kept telling him to stop, and he carried on saying, oh, sorry, and doing it anyway, and the security guards chucked him out. And that is progress, you know, and that guy doesn't stand around campaigning outside the nightclub saying, oh, but this used to be okay, I want this to still be okay. Everyone's saying to men like that now, it's not okay anymore. It's just not okay anymore. And, you know, I could go into more distasteful examples, but I won't, of things that basically through the 60s and 70s and earlier than that were considered okay. And then as attitudes have changed, there's been almost a retrospective vilification of people who did things which at the time were considered okay. And my anxiety, it's not an anxiety, what I'm conscious of is that the wealth everywhere in the UK has been built on exploitation, and I don't think we can ever get away from that, you know. But we do absolutely have to understand it. We do have to understand it and own it and recognise it. I mean, how many things up in the north of England where I'm from, the Rowntree family was rightly absolutely celebrated, and they were great benefactors. And now the whole Rowntree outfit is owned now by Nestle, and Nestle is a hideous company that exploits and leads countries where.
Terry, can you mute, please? Sorry. Thank you, Mary.
Okay. And all over the place, we can probably see foundations and buildings and streets being named after individuals or companies who, as attitudes change, we'll look back on and think, yeah, that really wasn't good. So the email that Cyril has mentioned really does bang on about the fact that the terrible things that Picton did were legal at the time. Well, that's as may be to a point, but I think the point is to be clear that although things were legal at the time and accepted at the time, society has moved on and we no longer wish to edify and celebrate those individuals. The point of tension is that these individuals were considered philanthropists and benefactors because they used their great wealth to benefit the local area. But as Peter says, they wouldn't have had that wealth if it hadn't have been for these exploitative and nefarious practices. So yes, we're grateful, but also we're unhappy. And I think actually going forward, making decisions on a case-by-case basis, there's going to have to be some sort of criteria, where we decide, does something need to be changed, or what approach do we take? Do we take a different approach to Picton Arcade than we do to Delabesh Road? And if so, why? There has to be a clear rationale. Otherwise, our critics will come at us for being inconsistent or incoherent. And I think coming up with that clear kind of criteria or strategy around the decisions that we make, that is going to take some time, and we have to have that ready then in order to move forward and do the review. And I would also just mention that, yes, the Leavers of Swansea say that 100% of the people that they have spoken to knew nothing about any of this. But as I mentioned in the council debate on this motion, I have never had so much correspondence on a council motion as I did from the people of Uplands asking me to support the Black Lives Matter motion and contributing really interesting suggestions to how we move this work forward. So I think that they're wrong about nobody having known, and they're wrong about nobody having wanted it and nobody taking any interest. And finally, on education, yes, again, in the council debate, I did mention my own poor understanding, really, of how slavery came about. And as Peter says, there has always been slavery. And one of the Uplands residents that I've been corresponding with about this has sent me some links to resources to educate myself more about empire and exploitation. And the first of those resources does talk about how even within Africa, the wealth of Africa itself was created by different tribes and groups of people travelling around, capturing others and enslaving them and taking them to different parts of the continent to work. And there's something more complicated, though, with a bunch of Westerners planning a land grab, infiltrating the community and becoming accepted, imposing their religion on everybody, and then, continuing a different degree of exploitation, really, than had ever been seen within Africa itself. And I think that this is stuff that the formal education system has skipped over. We're probably not going to change that, and it's not just our school children that need educating.
Sorry to rush you, Mary, but could you start to
sorry. So yeah, I think the education part of the motion is something that we definitely need to remember and keep up the agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, education in a wider sort of community sense rather than necessarily in schools. Yeah, Cyril, I'll bring you in now. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things. Yeah, definitely agree with what you said about exploitation, recognizing so much of the wealth has been drawn on different types of exploitation, and about owning it and recognizing it, but also recognizing how that's led, particularly slavery, to long-term systemic racism and those underlying issues in society. And I do dispute that some of what these slave traders and things did was accepted at the time, because there was a large abolitionist movement, and people fighting for emancipation, and people saying that it was wrong at the time. So it wasn't completely accepted at the time, and or it was just conveniently legally allowed, perhaps, shall we say, in some cases. And yeah, and I totally agree with the idea of having a very clear rationale for what we're doing. If there's no one else, I'll just bring Cyril in, and then I to kind of just bring just to a close, because a couple of makes just kind of underline what we're doing. Oh, and then I've got some to refer to the public questions. Don't let me forget to do that. Cyril.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. I totally agree with like what Peter said, and Leslie and Mary. You know, when she was touched in nightclubs, there's only one thing I can say for to call them a perverts. But at the end of the day, slavery was a bad thing. It's abhorrent. We need education on it. But also we got slavery today, the sex traffickers, we got the child traffickers. We need to sort it out and get people to know what people are out there making money on these poor people.
I think the issue is these things aren't mutually exclusive. Just because we're looking at one thing doesn't mean that we can't be angry and looking at and be upset about other things as well. And I think that the council is rightly working across the piece on these things. I know Councillor Pugh, you're on this community safety board and things like that. There's human trafficking, child sexual exploitation is a big issue that we are looking at across the city. And I don't think please don't anyone think that we're not. Leslie, did you want to come back in? Was your hand
Yes,
up?
please. Sorry, I've had problems with my hand.
Okay.
Sorry. Sorry, not my hand. Sorry, I better shut
electronic
up.
hand.
Right. Quickies. Mary, you said you've been getting a lot of correspondence. Is there any way you could compile that and let us all have a look at some of the comments you've had back?
I'm happy to ask the residents if they mind me passing it on. I think there might have been a group of friends, because some of the phrases were similar, so I think that they probably worked together to work on something.
I mean, if anything you could forward would be great, wouldn't it? Give us more ideas of what other people want us to do, not just what we think we should be doing.
Or I could even, without having to correspond back and forth too much, I can just take out the content and keep it anonymised, can't I?
That'd be great.
I'll certainly do that.
And the other quickie thing, I know I've got a big thing about this, but can we try and avoid strictly using the word educate, because it always makes me think of back in school, and a lot of people back in school couldn't stand being educated. Can we change the word to inform, giving people information that they didn't have, so that we're not telling them you've got it wrong because you didn't know. We're letting them have the information so they can rethink what they've learnt in the past. Thank you very much for letting me have about 3 bites of the cherry.
Good point. Okay. So as I said, we had a number of public questions come in yesterday morning. I'm assuming that they are largely from the same group, as they all kind of came in at the same time. I'm not going to read them all out because we haven't got time for that, but I'll just kind of pick up the key points to respond. And then perhaps I'll take out the email addresses and circulate them wider to the committee afterwards, and then we can give them written responses as well. So the first one is the one that has been referred to already from the Leavers of Swansea group, and it's the questions that I think they've asked of all councillors, and I believe that in terms of for records of formal complaints, that's been referred to our legal department, and they're going to give them the information about that. So can't answer that one. And also, as we said today, it's incredibly difficult to quantify how many people have contacted us about this, because it's been done in so many informal networks and things as well, rather than through the sort of formal council complaints process. So I don't know whether that's going to give them the answers that they need, really. Then second, they said a full list. Well, I think, as we've made clear, we don't have a list because this has only just started, and we're making no sort of presuppositions about where we're going. And again, with costs, we don't know what costs, because we haven't started the process, and we're going to look at lots of different options, and different options will cost different amounts, etc. The second question is from Stan Robinson, and he's sort of suggesting that the Black Lives Matter movement is a terrorist organisation, and disappointed that we're sort of standing, and will we apologise for standing 4 square? I don't know who used those terms, but I would disagree with the characterization of Black Lives Matter in that way. I would say that it's a very broad movement, and with all broad sort of social movements, there is a spectrum, and there's going to be people who have much more extreme demands than others. But everyone that's contacted me about this have been very positive and wanting to work together to improve things and be positive and make better racial and community cohesion. The next question is from a Maria Day, again saying why are we spending a fortune on things that nobody finds offensive, etc. But I would again say we don't know about the costs, and we're not sure sort of where this is going in things like that. And I think there are people that do find these things offensive, and whether or not they do, as we said, it's about telling sort of wider story. Then the next question is from Stephen Fox about involving the whole of Swansea on the issue. Absolutely. We will, I'm sure we'll plan an engagement programme, and we'll be open to people to make contributions, and we'll get that underway as soon as we can. The next one is from Lee Haynes, who asks, again, saying that we're changing street names to appease a terrorist organisation, which again is a mischaracterisation, I think, of what we're doing, and saying about Harvard Copperworks and the mummy in the museum and things like that. And again, it's just about, I think, this wider, as we said, the wider providing information about all these things is what we want to do. We've got Gwyneth Elias, who's asked about again about costs in the current economic climate, and about slavery existing in modern slavery in terms of people trafficking. And again, I think, as we've just said, fully agree that's a very important issue, and we are working on that in other parts of the council. Becky Thomas again asked about the cost. Can't answer that at this stage because we have, as I said, we haven't made any decisions. Alistair Riley again asking why are we not spending money on mental health, homelessness, etc. Again, as I said, we're not mutually exclusive. We're definitely very concerned about those issues, but that's not what we're looking at in this committee. Susan Edwards asking again about public consultation. Definitely that's going to take place. Nuccio Cantali saying, as an Italian, this is sort of stirring up racial tension in the city, and again asking about numbers of complaints. And again, very much the complete opposite is stirring up racial tension. We're trying to promote community cohesion with this, and it would be fantastic as part of it perhaps to look at the amazing contribution that Italians have made to Swansea over the years in terms of our cafe culture and things like that. I think again that's another fantastic story to tell. We've got Gillian Mason. No, she just says, can you let her know the outcome of this discussion? Well, I can certainly do that one. Send you on the minutes of the meeting, etc. I've also had some information, sort of a good document from Race Council Cymru, who I will feed this into the wider committee. Only had it sort of in the last day or so, and this morning another email, so I haven't printed this one out, sorry, from Stand Up to Racism, who are in conjunction with other groups going to submit a paper to us about what they would like to have some input on what we're looking at. So just a sort of flavour for what we've had in the last day or so, and I will, as a committee, well, I'll do my best to respond to those formally, and I'll circulate them, as I said, to the committee in due course. Anybody wanted Leslie, your hand up? Did you want to, or is it still up from previously? No. Okay. Okay. So can I just sort of confirm then we've agreed to add the item to the work plan and to work in a subgroup, as like a task force kind of thing to keep this going and report back to our next meeting. And then our end product will be a policy and an action plan. Cyril, did you want to come in? You're muted.
We agreed on all what we're doing by now.
Yeah.
With Yvonne, she's been co-opted. Co-opted normally haven't got a voting right. Can we say she has got a voting right today?
She's unfortunately had to leave the call. She's just texted me to apologise that she's had to go to another meeting. But I'm not sure. I can't remember. Can Democratic Services would a co-opted member have a vote if anything needed to go to a vote?
I would have to check that, but I'm assuming from the talking of the group, it would all be informed together and then have a policy go into cabinet.
Yeah,
So
I don't think we'll
gonna
need
be anything specific to vote on. It would all be a collective group putting something forward.
Yeah.
But always have a chat with Hugh about that if you want a little bit more clarification on that.
Yeah, I don't think much is going to. We don't generally take things to votes in this committee, do we? It's generally a lot more informal. Linda, did you want to come in? Sorry, Linda.
Can I ask? I mean, did I miss something? Is there a sort of subgroup? Am I on that group that's going to be discussing this? Because I feel passionate about it.
Absolutely. It's an open invitation to everybody on the committee that wants to be on that subgroup. Fantastic. Yes.
Because I think this is a good opportunity moving forward. I think this
Absolutely.
is a way that we can demonstrate our past and go forward and tell the full story.
Amazing. Completely agree. Thank you, Linda. Terry, did you want to come in quickly?
Yeah,
I'm just really conscious of the time. You're muted again, Terry. Sorry. You're muted, Terry. There we are.
Okay, now, yeah, regarding Yvonne, we turned down, yes, we've co-opted Yvonne. Why don't we just propose and second, take a vote and put it on a committee full stop?
Well, that's what we're doing, isn't it? Co-option. That's what we've agreed to do.
No, I was just thinking what Cyril said earlier on. Co-option is one thing, but being selected or elected on, gives them all the rights as everybody else. Whereas co-option, there's limited.
Okay, I can check. Well, perhaps we'll check with Hugh Evans what the sort of formal roles, and then we can confirm that next time if we need to do anything further. Okay, so just to recap, so then we've agreed to add the items to the work plan, to create a policy and action plan, to do some work in a smaller working group. I'll email the committee following this meeting to get your availability, to co-op Councillor Jardine, and then and yeah, and that we have a lot of work to do, and really appreciate everybody's comments in that respect. I think that. Is that okay? So let's draw a line into the item for today, and to report back formally next time. So, Councillor Pugh, just before you just messaged it, you're going to need to go. Do you want to come in as a equalities in your portfolio? Is there anything you wanted to raise before you leave us? No.
No, I need to say thank you for
put you on the spot.
That's all right. Thank you for the invite this morning, and I think everybody's heading in the right direction. I think this is great to have a subgroup, get a really good working party together, and work through the issues. And yes, there are a million different things that you could include on, but we do need to sort of stick to what the motion is actually about. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, it'll just go on and on and on, really. Do you know what I mean? So, but I think that everybody here on the PTC, you're all singing from the same hymn book. So that's a brilliant start, isn't it? So, but yeah, if you could do things outside of this meeting so that you can really get some robust work done, then well done. Thank you very much for the invite, and very grateful to be here, and well done to you all.
Thank you. Okay, so our last item on the agenda is just the work plan. So as you can see, the last because everything's sort of been shifted around, we wanted to bring back the energy strategy and the sustainable development policy for the environment part of the work plan back. I've been in touch with Martin Nichols, and he's happy to do that. And Susie Richards on the sustainable development side. So that meeting would be on the 27th of August as part of our sort of usual pattern of meetings, I believe. Kate, is that already in the diary, or?
I don't believe there are any meetings in August. The next meeting on the agenda is in September.
Oh, okay.
Because only core meetings, planning, scrutiny. I don't think PDCs were scheduled for August because of summer holidays and.
Yeah. Well, it's up to the committee then. Do we want to do that, to bring it back in August? I'm just conscious that we want to get the work plan finished before annual council, don't we? But I guess we could continue things. So sorry, Joe, is your hand up?
Sorry, just a quick question of process in relation to the sustainable development policy. When I spoke to Susie on Monday, I think she was waiting for a couple of comments back from the draft paper.
Ah, right, okay.
Is that all in train? It's just in terms of her bringing the paper back whenever the next PDC
Okay,
meeting
apologies.
will
I've sort of missed a step there, obviously. I think with everything that's been going on, we've kind of, so well, perhaps I could recirculate that to committee and get some more, more comments then.
Great.
Cyril, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just on this August issue, I'm sure the leader is trying to clear August out so that all staff, because of COVID, they've been working so hard. You'd like them to take a break.
Okay, so I'm happy to move that to September then. Joe, was your hand up again, or was it still up from before? No, okay. Terry, were you wanting to come in?
No, I'm okay now.
Okay, so we'll say September. Oh, I haven't got my calendar in front of me. Kate, do you have the date for that?
29th of September, Chair.
29th of September.
20 what?
29th of September would be back as to the usual. And so, yeah, so on that, we'd have the energy strategy update, sustainable development policy update, and some report backs from the working group on the Black Lives Matters issues. If that's agreed with everybody. Fantastic. I shall draw the meeting to a close then, if no one else got anything to add. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if it was long, but we had some really good discussions, I think, and we've moved forward on 3 important issues today. So thank you very much for attending, and thank you to the officers.
And enjoy your break as well.
Yes.
Have a lovely holiday, Lou.